Hey, welcome back guys, it's Lucius, and today we're going to be talking all about what if Itachi joined Sasuke at the 5 Kage Summit. Now, I think to set the stage a bit, we have to assume that everything happens the way it does in the story normally, but for the sake of the video, we'll have Kabuto bring Itachi back a little bit early. But other than that, we're going to be focusing strictly on the combat in this video, so without further ado, let's get right into the fighting, shall we? First thing of note, Itachi's presence at the 5 Kage Summit is probably going to draw out the other Kage that were waiting in the conference room previously while the Raikage and Sasuke were squaring off, which means, right from the beginning, we're going to get a 4v2 match with Sasuke and Itachi versus the 4 Kage. Notice how I didn't say 5. This is because when Sasuke goes to confront Danzo in the conference room, he flees. If Danzo knew that Sasuke was there and Itachi was there with him, who was supposed to be dead at this point, there's no way he's going to stick around, even with the backup of the other Kage. So he's going to take off and run just like he did before. The next thing I want to cover is Edo Itachi's abilities. We are all familiar with them, but we have to remind ourselves that the Edo Tensei would allow Itachi to operate with limitless chakra, and he'd be able to regenerate from any wound. The Kage would have to seal him to completely remove him as a threat. This is most troublesome. Now, regardless of the fact of whether the Kage have capable sealing jutsu prep, I imagine they would, being the level of shinobi they are, their main concern comes with the fact that Susanoo can now be sustained indefinitely, at least in Itachi's case. Sasuke does have a time limit on his. He will run out of stamina eventually. Itachi, on the other hand, can maintain his Susanoo indefinitely, and by extension, the Totsuka Blade, which is a one-shot sealing weapon that could take out any of the Kage. They don't have a resistant for it. The Yata Mirror, which can deflect any physical or ninjutsu attack formed against it by changing its properties to match that of the incoming attack. Now, this is the biggest problem for Kage such as the Mizu Kage, who doesn't really have any spectacular physical attributes. Now, her acid-style corrosive vapor can't be used in this situation as well, because she's going to be fighting in a room with other Kage, and they need to breathe and not die. So that's a big hit to her arsenal. Now we're going to go over some of the ninjutsu capabilities of the combatants. Now, we have a really good sample size from watching Sasuke fight the Raikage in the anime that we know that the fight wasn't really going great for Sasuke, but the Amaterasu managed to force the Raikage into severing his own arm, which was definitely a big hit to his physical strength. But we do see the Raikage make a lot of his attacks with only one arm, so I'm pretty sure his fighting style isn't totally crippled, but he will have to adjust. Now, things like the Liger Bomb are probably off the table at this point, and I could definitely see the Raikage getting too hasty and moving in and getting hit with some Amaterasu, just like he did in the Sasuke fight. He's fast enough to dodge it, but I feel like he is fast enough to dodge it, but I feel like he would be willing to take the damage just in order to get a decent blow off on Itachi or Sasuke. And keep in mind that Sasuke's flame control of Amaterasu would allow him to form barriers or even manipulate its shape so that it would form around a ribcage or maybe even on Itachi's Yata Mirror. Who knows? Or maybe not on it, but you get the idea. But let's continue to talk about the Amaterasu and how it interacts with the other characters. Now, we see in the 5 Kage Summit originally that Gaara's sand is actually fast enough to be able to defend him against the Amaterasu initially. Now, that sand is fine, but, which is good news for Gaara, the sand is fast enough to protect him from the Amaterasu. However, if Gaara had to send his sand to the Tsuchikage or the Mizu Kage to defend them from the Amaterasu attack, then we're looking at a different problem altogether, because Gaara has to make the conscious decision to send his sand to defend somebody else. It will defend him automatically. Now, other than amputating your limbs, there's really no way to stop the Amaterasu. As we saw with the Raikage earlier, he was hit with an Amaterasu after he slammed into Sasuke's ribcage, and he had to cut off his own arm or it would have spread to the rest of his body. Now, if the others were put in a similar situation, I don't believe they'd be able to get rid of the flames in the same way that the Raikage did. Now, of course, they could amputate themselves, which is a reasonable strategy, or maybe even Onoki can particle style away a part of the body, if necessary, to get rid of the Amaterasu. Now, obviously, none of the Kage can infinitely just get rid of their limbs if they get tagged by the Amaterasu. So we're going to move on next to the absence of Tsunade in this fight. Really just a fifth member would have been great for the Hokage, or Kage rather, but the fact that it specifically is Tsunade that is not present, as we see in the Madara fight, hurts their chances of getting through the Susanoo defenses greatly. Especially if A loses an arm similar to what he does in the Sasuke fight, then he's already weakened. The Tsuchikage does have the ability to amplify somebody's speed or their strength. However, the Raikage barreling into Itachi at 100% versus him barreling into Itachi at 150% is negligible when the Yatamir just deflects all physical attacks anyway. Now, I think this fight can be decided either way. If the Kage are forced to retreat, or if the Uchihas are defeated, then it's anybody's game. Now, Sasuke and Itachi don't need to kill all of the Kage to secure victory. If they get too damaged and they need to retreat, that would be a perfectly fine win condition as well. Remember, the Kage are very powerful fighters, but they're also extremely important political figures. They can't just stand around and get bodied all day by a couple of emo Uchiha boys. I think if at least one of them gets taken out, it might be wise for the rest of them to just leave. But who would that be? My first guess is that the weakest link appears to be Maid Terumi, or the 5th Mizukage, and it isn't because her ninjutsu isn't capable, it's just a very bad matchup against this specific skill set, especially when she's not allowed to use her corrosive mist due to the fact that she's fighting in a team. Now, as I said before, the Mizukage lacks any remarkable physical characteristics, which makes her more open to an attack like the Amaterasu or being sealed away by the Totsuka Blade. Going back to that point, I told you that Gaara could defend himself with the sand from the Amaterasu, and the Raikage could just outright dodge it. Now, Onoki also doesn't possess the speed that the Raikage has, but he can amplify his own. And whether or not it would make him fast enough to dodge the Amaterasu is beyond my speculation at this point, but what I can say is he could use his particle style to potentially contain the Amaterasu without outright having to get hit by the technique itself and then, let's say, amputating a limb in the same fashion that the Raikage did. So if Onoki had presence of mind to form a particle style in front of him if he was the target of this jutsu, he might be able to contain it, but again, I'm not sure for certain. Now, moving on. So we've covered enough about the Amaterasu, I think. We should talk about the Totsuka Blade, which I think is the biggest threat to the Kage in this fight, since it is a one-shot, and there's no healing from this. They will get sealed if they come into contact with the blade. This is not a problem for the Raikage, as again, just like before, he's just too fast to hit with this. However, again, fighters like the Mizukage Mei, and even Gaara to some extent, are in great danger. The Totsuka Blade is a spirit weapon. The Totsuka Blade is able to not only pierce Orochimaru and the White Snake and seal them completely, but when it was used against Nagato, he was not able to absorb it, which means Gaara's sand would not protect him against the Totsuka Blade. It would probably just go right through it. And a similar fate is waiting for Onoki if he tries to use an Earth Golem to guard himself from the Totsuka Blade. The only option that the Kage have is to get out of the way. The only one fast enough to do this from what I've seen is the Raikage, as even though Naruto was sparring with Itachi in his Edo form very casually, Itachi was keeping pace, and for that feat of speed alone, I'd say he's probably, if not relative to the Raikage, at least a tier below. And I think that is a very fair award to Itachi's speed, rather than an outright wank and saying he could definitely run up on the Raikage and throw hands, because I don't think that's happening, and neither does Itachi, which is why he's keeping his Susanoo up the entire fight, armed with the Totsuka Blade and the Yatamir, repelling all attacks that he can, and keeping the Kage at bay. Now, I don't know for sure if the Kage would even realize what the Totsuka Blade is, but they'd probably just stay away from it, because it's a giant flaming sword. Which brings us to Sasuke, and in a fight this high level, I think Sasuke's probably going to be the guy that runs out of chakra first. Now, his saving grace is not just Itachi, but a very important thing that happens in the actual show that restores Sasuke's chakra, and that is the White Zetsu. As it happens in the show, the White Zetsu appear, and they latch themselves on to the Kage in the conference room and begin to sap them of their chakra, restoring some of it to Sasuke. Now, if this were to happen during this fight, it would be a prime opportunity for Itachi to just seal at least one of the Kage with the Totsuka Blade. So I'm leaning towards, if the White Zetsu interferes and saps away chakra from the Kage and gives it to Sasuke, then this fight is basically a done deal. As I said before, this distraction would be more than enough for Itachi to seal at least one of the Kage with the Totsuka Blade, and if that happens, the other Kage are probably forced to retreat. It really looks like the odds are pretty bad for the Kage, so I don't see why, with their significance to the ninja world, that they wouldn't just cut and run and fight another day. This is also before the Shinobi Alliance is formed, so it's probably more like all the Kage are looking out for themselves. We have seen Gaara able to pull a Susanoo user out of the Avatar, and it's likely that he'd be able to accomplish this again with Itachi, but this isn't the desert where they fought Madara, which is where he first performed this act. This is more of an inner chamber with significantly less sand than a desert, I would imagine. It's possible that Gaara can utilize the rubble as the fight goes on to create more sand. I don't know if he can do that, but I don't see why he wouldn't be able to. However, I just don't see a situation where Gaara can pull Itachi out of the Susanoo, and the Kage can act quickly enough to seal him while Sasuke is doing Sasuke things. I just don't see an opportunity where the Kage are able to pull Itachi out of the Susanoo and seal him quickly enough without Sasuke trying to interfere in somehow. And with techniques like the Amaterasu, it's really not prudent for the Kage to try and stay still any longer than they absolutely have to. And those are my thoughts on the video, guys. Let me know what you think. Who do you think would win? I'm taking the Uchiha, not in a free-for-all, but I think they would be able to knock off at least one of the Kage, and I think the others would scatter and just retreat to fight another day. But that's the video, guys. Let me know what you think. Give a like, go ahead and subscribe, and catch you on the next one.